Hi everyone, welcome back. Looking at GPs and where students have problem after problem after problem in assessments. The interesting part is I question myself about when I nag and remind students about something and they still get it wrong. So I'm always looking for, I don't know, tricks and little things to help people, often rules. And the rule of, now I've got a rule for this one. When you're talking about recursive, always write down the first term. There's a rule. Recursive, the first term is 5. Recursive, first term is 90. I see student after student after student forget to write the first term down as automatically lose a mark. So if it's out of 3, you get 2 out of 3, even if you know what you're doing, but you forget to write the first term. So rule, write the first term down when it's recursive. You don't have to write the first term when it's a formula because the first term is built into the formula. So let's have a look over here at recursive. What did I do to 5 to get 10? So each time I am timesing it by 2, I'm timesing it by 2, and that makes it a GP. Now we're not talking here about what is a GP and why does it work that way, just talking about it is a GP, and most students see that's a GP. Geometric progression. Geometry means that we're multiplying each time. Interesting case in this one though, we're actually dividing by 3. So we don't use dividing by 3 in the system, we use multiply by 1/3, which is the same as divide by 3. So if I multiply 90 by 1/3, it's the same as divide by 3. So if I multiply 30 by 1/3, I get 10. That's the same as dividing by 3. So let's go back to the recursive. Have this rule where we talk about Tn plus 1. Now, a lot of people will use Tn and Tn minus 1. It's your choice which one you want to use in it. What's going to happen in your question. I talk about this, everyone talks about that, being to get the next term, you have to use the previous term. So if the previous term was 5, how do I get the next term of 10? I multiplied by 2. And there's our recursive formula. You wrote the T down to start before you forget, write down what the first term is. Then you use this idea of Tn plus 1, Tn. Now, by the way, I call it 3 T's, one of my methods of trying to get people to be brainwashed and memorised. If the question says recursive, you have to do it that way. If it doesn't say recursive, you have a choice. Here in Western Australia, you can use your ClassPad calculator and do it that way, but most of the time they're going to ask you for the formula or a form of the formula. Now, if the wording of the question doesn't say formula and it doesn't say recursive, you've got one choice, formula. So even if you don't fully understand it, you're not confident, that's what's going to give it away, is having that formula there. Now, in Western Australia, it's written on our formula sheets, you don't have to memorise it. So let's have a look what happens in that one. So, oh, by the way, I could have tidied that up. A lot of people would write Tn plus 1 equals, equals 2 Tn, which is the same as Tn times by 2. Let's have a look at this. Tn equals the first term. The first term is 5. And of course, if I started that question again and started with, instead of 5, I started with 50. The starting point affects everything about it. So if you had $5 in a bank account, you were doubling for, say, 10 days. Whereas if you started with $50 in a bank account, you doubled for 10 days. It's a massive difference. Between the A and the R, there's a multiplication. The ratio in this case, what did we do to 5 to get 10? We times by 2. If ever you want to figure that out or you can't see it, the ratio is the second term divided by the first term. So 10 divided by, if you don't see it, you can just go 10 divided by 5 and that will give you that 2 there. So the ratio, second, you can go third divided by second. If you want to prove it's other videos we can go to. Then you've got this little n minus 1 up the top. There's the question done. So it's got A built into it, it's got R built into it, and you're just talking about the n minus 1. So by the way, if you wanted to know the, let's say we wanted to know the 6th term, let's make that really obvious. It's 5 times 2 to the 6 take 1. Let's have a look at what it means. We had 5 times by 2 to the 5. So we've got started with 5. Now how many times we're going to multiply by 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you looked at this, you'd go 5 times 32, and hopefully you know that 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 2 to the power of 5. And there you've got that as 160. So you could have just done it with common sense, but of course they'll do yucky ones, not as simple as this, and you'll be getting the 50th term, or do it in reverse, which mucks people's brains up. So the sixth term would be 160. So you can have a look at this formula if it makes sense here. We're starting with the first number, we're multiplying by the ratio, but one less times, because we've already got the 5 to start with. So we're not going to multiply it 6 times, we're only going to multiply it 5 times. If it makes sense to your brain, it does. Back to recursive, we want the 3 t's, so we've got a tn plus 1 and a tn. If you're a creature habit, write it that way all the time, but if you see it written differently in the assessment, it might muck your brain up. 3 t's, 1, 2, 3, write the first term. So this is to get the next term, use the previous term. And what did you do to 90, the previous term, to get 30? Now, a lot of people could easily write that you had to divide by 3. And really, in that case, the question's correct. So you'd have tn plus 1 equals tn, and you could then write that as divide by 3. So if you want to write it that way, some people will then go, oh, I don't like writing divide by 3. I want to multiply by 1/3, which still can be written that way, or it can be written as 1/3 of tn. Whichever way you want to write it, it doesn't matter. So that's your recursive, whereas this is formula. So if it doesn't say formula, I'll say, oh my goodness, get sick, I've got to laugh. Sick of hearing myself say it. If it doesn't say recursive, use the formula. So this case will be, first term is 90, r is now, a bit careful with the fractions. A lot of people will put a bracket around the fraction. It's pretty obvious that 30 over 90 is a third, 10 over 30 is a third. By the way, usually avoid the yucky ones, I call them yucky, the ones that are not so obvious. Always look for the nicer numbers, like 10 divided by 30 is a third. Then you got to n minus 1. Now the question's done. That is it. And again, if you want, say the fifth term, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I want the fifth term. It's 90 times 1/3 to the power of 5 take 1, which is 4. So we're actually writing 90 times a third, times a third, times a third, times a third. So 90 times a third, times a third, times a third. Here's where people come unstuck. 10 thirds times 1/3. And I've nagged about, doesn't matter who you are, what level maths you're doing, multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. So 10 ones are 10, and 3 threes are 9. So I could have done all sorts of things here. I could have gone cancelling out. It's actually 90 times by 1 on. 3 threes are 9, 27, 81. And you go, oh, well, I end up with 90 on 81. Trouble with that is a lot of people won't see the cancelling because they're cancelling by 3s. Now, in Western Australia, most of the time in exams, you don't have to simplify the fraction unless they tell you to. So I do like this method of thinking, but if it's talking about the 10th term, it gets pretty revolting, and you can go through this system. Now, if you know, for example, though, that you know that 1/3 to the 4 is just 1 on 81. So if you know your 3, 9, 27 and 81, makes it easier for people. I'm always nagging about 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Almost like if you went through those, it comes up everywhere in maths. And you go through the 3s, 3, 9, 27, 81, 243, 729, you learn them. Very helpful with it. Oh, enough of videos getting too long. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the future.